Robert Chen hadn't walked these streets in decades. The gleaming towers of his business empire loomed somewhere behind him as he cut through the old downtown district, a shortcut his driver had suggested to avoid traffic. At 62, Robert had built an empire in tech manufacturing, but the wealth had come at a cost he measured every day in the silence of his penthouse. His daughter, Emily, had vanished 19 years ago during a family vacation in Thailand. She'd been only 5 years old, playing on the beach one moment, gone the next. The investigation had consumed years of his life and millions of dollars, but eventually, even the most dedicated private investigators had nothing left to pursue. Now, as winter rain began to fall, Robert noticed a figure huddled in a doorway. The young woman couldn't have been more than 25, wrapped in layers of tattered clothing, a cardboard sign propped against her knees. He'd passed countless homeless people over the years, usually with a pang of guilt that he soothed with annual charitable donations. But something about this girl made him stop. Perhaps it was the way she held herself, or the flash of her eyes when she looked up, not with the defeated vacancy he'd seen in so many faces, but with a fierce, guarded intelligence. "Spare some change?" she asked, her voice hoarse but steady. Robert reached for his wallet, but as he did, something caught his eye. On the girl's wrist, barely visible beneath the grime and frayed sleeve, was a birthmark, a distinctive crescent shape. His heart stopped. Emily had had the same mark in exactly the same place. He'd kissed it 1,000 times when she was small, called it her moon mark. "What's her name?" he asked, his voice strangling on the words. The girl's expression shifted to suspicion. "Why do you care?" Robert's mind raced. It couldn't be. The odds were astronomical. But that birthmark, the shape of her face beneath the dirt, something in the set of her jaw. "I'm Robert. Robert Chen.
And I
think I might know you." The girl's laugh was bitter. "I don't know any billionaires, mister. You've got the wrong person." But when he knelt down, ignoring the rain soaking through his expensive suit, and gently asked, "May I see your wrist?" something flickered across her face, a memory perhaps, ancient and buried. Sarah, as she called herself now, hadn't thought about her childhood in years. The early memories were fragmented, dreamlike. A big house, a woman's laugh, warm arms holding her. But those images had been buried under 19 years of survival. She'd grown up in the foster system after being found wandering the streets of Bangkok, suffering from amnesia. No one had ever come for her. No one had claimed her. Eventually, she'd aged out of the system and fallen through the cracks, as so many did. Looking at this well-dressed man kneeling in the rain, something stirred in the depths of her consciousness. When he'd said the name Emily, she'd felt a jolt, like touching a live wire. The man was staring at her wrist, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the rain. "The moon mark," he whispered. "Emily, you used to make me tell you stories about the man in the moon who left his mark on you, because you were special. Do you remember?" Sarah's breathing quickened. She did remember. Or did she? A voice, deep and warm, telling stories at bedtime. A large hand holding her small one, a thumb brushing over the crescent on her wrist. "Anyone could have this mark," she said, but her voice wavered. Robert pulled out his phone with shaking hands and scrolled through photos. "Please, just look. Just look at this." He held up a picture of a little girl with dark curls and bright eyes, laughing in someone's arms. The girl had the same birthmark visible on her wrist, but it was the eyes that made Sarah's world tilt. They were her eyes, her exact eyes, staring back at her from nearly 2 decades ago. "This can't be real," Sarah breathed, but even as she said it, more memories were surfacing.
A beach.
The sound of waves. A woman screaming her name. Terror and confusion. Then nothing. A black void where her early childhood should have been. Robert was openly crying now, and Sarah realized with shock that she was too. "A DNA test," Robert said urgently. "We can do a DNA test.
Today. Right now.
Please, I've been searching for you for 19 years. Please, just give me a chance to prove it." Sarah looked down at her filthy clothes, at the cardboard sign advertising her desperation, at the life she'd built from scraps and determination. What did she have to lose? Either this man was delusional, or her entire understanding of who she was stood on the verge of collapse. The clinic Robert took her to was the kind of place Sarah had never imagined entering. Everything was cream-colored and pristine, with abstract art on the walls and a receptionist who didn't even blink at Sarah's appearance, though she must have reeked. Robert had tried to take her shopping first, but she'd refused. If this was real, if she was really his daughter, then he should see her as she was. No pretense. No pretty packaging. Just the truth of what she'd become. The DNA test itself was simple: a quick cheek swab, some paperwork, and then the agonizing wait. The lab technician promised results within 3 hours using their rapid testing service. 3 hours. Sarah sat in the clinic's waiting room, and Robert sat beside her, neither speaking. What was there to say? The silence stretched between them, heavy with 19 years of absence and the crushing weight of possibility. Robert finally broke the silence. After you disappeared, we searched for months. The Thai police, private investigators, we even hired psychics, though I knew it was desperate. Your mother, she never recovered. The grief consumed her. We divorced 5 years after you vanished. She blamed me for taking my eyes off you, for just a moment. I blamed myself too. His voice cracked. She died 3 years ago.
Cancer.
But I think it was really a broken heart. Sarah absorbed this information, feeling both numb and overwhelmed. If she was Emily, she'd had a mother who died grieving for her. The waste of it, the terrible, senseless waste. Tell me about her, she heard herself say. Tell me about my mother. Robert's face transformed, and for the next 2 hours, he painted a picture of Margaret Chen, a woman who loved art and music, who'd fought to preserve historic buildings in their city, who'd baked elaborate birthday cakes and sang off-key in the car. With each story, Sarah felt fragments of memory clicking into place: a woman's perfume, the sound of piano music, being lifted high in the air and feeling completely safe. When the lab technician finally called them back, Sarah's hands were trembling so badly that Robert took one of them, squeezed gently. The technician's face was professionally neutral. Mr. Chen, Miss Sarah, the results show a 99.9% probability of paternity. You are, conclusively, father and daughter. The world tilted. Sarah, Emily, felt the ground shift beneath her feet, and if Robert hadn't been holding her arm, she might have fallen. 19 years of identity, of being Sarah Nobody, the foster kid, the failure, the homeless girl, dissolved in an instant. She was Emily Chen, daughter of a billionaire, a girl who'd been loved and desperately mourned. The technician was still talking, something about official documentation and certified copies, but the words were just noise. Robert was crying again, but this time he was smiling too, and before Emily could process what was happening, he'd pulled her into an embrace. She stiffened. She hadn't been hugged in years, had learned not to let anyone that close, but something in his touch was familiar, safe, like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known existed. My daughter, he kept saying. My Emily. I knew it.
I knew you were alive.
I felt it. They left the clinic in a daze. Robert's driver had been waiting, and the man's professional composure cracked when Robert told him the news. This is Emily, James. My daughter. James, who Emily would later learn had been Robert's driver for 25 years and had been there the day she disappeared, actually pulled the car over to compose himself. The reality was settling over Emily in waves. She had a father. She had family. She had a history that stretched back beyond the fragmented memories and the foster homes. But with the joy came a crushing wave of grief and anger. Why didn't you find me? She asked suddenly, the words bursting out. I was in the system. I had fingerprints, records. Why didn't anyone connect me to the missing girl? Robert's face fell. You were found in Bangkok, but you were processed in Thailand and then transferred through international channels. By the time you ended up in American foster care, you'd been lost in bureaucratic shuffles. And you had amnesia. You couldn't tell anyone who you were. I had investigators looking, but we were searching for Emily Chen. No one was looking for a Jane Doe with no memory. The explanation was logical, but it didn't ease the ache of lost years. Emily had suffered hunger, neglect, abuse in some of the foster homes, homelessness. All while her father had been looking for her, while resources that could have changed everything sat unused. "I need time," she said quietly. I can't just step into a new life. I don't even know who I am anymore." Robert's mansion looked like something from a movie, sprawling, elegant, positioned on a hillside with views of the city below. As the car pulled through the gates, Emily felt her anxiety spike. This wasn't her world. She'd been sleeping in shelters and doorways, eating from soup kitchens, stealing food when necessary. Now she was supposed to live here, in this palace, as if the last 19 years hadn't happened. Mrs. Morrison, the housekeeper, met them at the door. She was an older woman with kind eyes that went wide when she saw Emily. "Dear God," she whispered. "It's like seeing a ghost." Robert had called ahead, explained the situation. Mrs. Morrison had been with the family since before Emily was born. "You don't remember me, do you?" she asked gently. Emily shook her head, but somewhere in the back of her mind, there was a warmth associated with this woman, a sense of safety. The house was too much to process. Marble floors, art that was probably worth more than most people earned in a lifetime, rooms that seemed to go on forever. Robert showed her to what had been her childhood bedroom. He'd kept it exactly as it was the day she disappeared. Toys still on the shelves, a small bed with a princess canopy, books about dinosaurs and space. "I couldn't change it," he admitted. It felt like giving up. Emily stood in the doorway, afraid to enter. This room belonged to a little girl who no longer existed, who had been replaced by someone harder, someone forged in the fires of abandonment and survival. "I can't sleep here," she said. "I can't, this isn't me anymore." Robert nodded, understanding. "We'll set up one of the guest rooms. Anything you want. This is your home, Emily, but we do things at your pace." The guest room was still more luxury than Emily had experienced in her memory, but at least it didn't carry the weight of ghosts. Robert left her alone to shower and rest, and standing under hot water, unlimited hot water, Emily finally let herself break down. She cried for the little girl who'd been lost, for the mother who died, without knowing her daughter was alive, for all the years stolen from them both. She cried until she had nothing left. When she emerged, she found clothes laid out. Simple things, jeans and soft sweaters, nothing too flashy. Mrs. Morrison had guessed its sizes. There was also a note from Robert, telling her to come downstairs whenever she was ready, no pressure. Emily dressed slowly, catching sight of herself in the mirror. Clean, with her hair washed, wearing clothes that fit, she looked almost normal. Almost like someone who belonged here. Downstairs, Emily found Robert in his study, surrounded by files. When she entered, he looked up, and his expression was both joyful and heartbroken. "I want to know what happened," Emily said, without preamble. "I want to know how I ended up on the streets of Bangkok, with no memory. I want to know why no one found me." Robert nodded grimly. "I've already called my investigator. He's coming tomorrow. We'll find out everything." That night, Robert showed Emily the investigation files from her disappearance, thousands of pages of reports, interviews, theories. The day she'd vanished, they'd been at a beach resort. Margaret had been reading. Robert had been checking his phone just for a moment. Emily had been building a sandcastle. When he'd looked up, she was gone. The initial theory was drowning, but no body was ever found. Then kidnapping, but no ransom demand.
Came.
Witnesses reported seeing a young girl matching Emily's description with a woman at a bus station 2 days later, heading toward Bangkok, but the lead had gone cold. "I think someone took you deliberately," Robert said quietly.
But why?
"We never received any contact." "And how did you end up with amnesia?" Emily touched the back of her head, where a scar was hidden beneath her hair. "I have this," she said. "The foster parents who first took me in said I had signs of head trauma when I was found. Maybe someone hit me, tried to, I don't know, erase who I was." The thought was chilling. Someone had stolen her, hurt her, and abandoned her, leaving a 5-year-old child with no identity wandering the streets of a foreign city. The cruelty of it was incomprehensible. Robert's hands clenched into fists. We'll find who did this, he promised. I don't care how long it takes or what it costs. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She wandered the house, finding herself in the kitchen where Mrs. Morrison was preparing breakfast for the morning. The older woman looked up, unsurprised. Couldn't sleep? Emily shook her head. When you were little, you used to have bad dreams. You'd come to the kitchen, and I'd make you warm milk with honey. Would you like some? Emily nodded, and as Mrs. Morrison prepared it, she asked, "What was I like before?" Mrs. Morrison's smile was sad and sweet. Bright. So curious about everything. You asked a million questions a day. And fearless, you were always climbing things, exploring. Your father used to say you'd either be an astronaut or give him a heart attack. She handed Emily the mug. And you were kind. You'd share your toys, worry about hurt animals. You had the biggest heart. Emily sipped the milk, and the taste triggered something, a flash of memory, standing in this same kitchen, much smaller, Mrs. Morrison placing a Band-Aid on her scraped knee. I remember, she whispered. I remember this. The milk. You always made it when I was sad. Mrs. Morrison's eyes filled with tears. Welcome home, sweet girl. Welcome home. Marcus Torres, Robert's lead investigator, arrived the next morning with his own set of files and a grim expression. Mr. Chin, I've been reviewing the old case with fresh eyes, now that we know Emily survived. There's something that never sat right with me. He spread photographs across the dining table, surveillance footage from the resort, witness statements, timelines. The woman seen with a child matching Emily's description at the bus station? I had our tech team age enhance the image. Look at this. Emily leaned forward, her breath catching. The woman in the grainy photo looked vaguely familiar in a way that made her skin crawl. Marcus continued. Her name is Linda Peterson. She was working at the resort as a childcare provider. She quit the day after Emily disappeared, left no forwarding address. At the time, police questioned her, but she had an alibi. Supposedly, she was at a doctor's appointment when Emily vanished. The alibi was faked, Robert said flatly. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded. I believe so. And here's where it gets interesting. Linda Peterson was hired through an agency, but the agency has no record of her employment history before that job. It's like she materialized just to work at that resort. I think someone planted her there specifically to take Emily. The room fell silent. Emily felt ice forming in her veins. But why? Why would someone orchestrate something so elaborate? We weren't even supposed to be at that resort. We booked it last minute. Robert's face had gone pale. I had just closed a major business deal. There were competitors who lost billions because of it. One in particular, Victor Huang, made threats but nothing specific enough to act on. We had security at home, but on vacation? His voice trailed off. Marcus pulled out another file. Victor Huang had a sister, Linda Huang. She changed her name to Peterson 6 months before Emily disappeared. She died in a car accident in Thailand 5 years ago. Emily felt the pieces clicking together like a horrific puzzle. She was supposed to hold me for ransom, wasn't she? But something went wrong. Marcus nodded. I think the head trauma was an accident. Maybe you tried to escape, fell, hit your head. The amnesia complicated everything. You couldn't tell anyone who you were, and she couldn't exactly return you in that condition without facing questions. So she abandoned me, Emily finished, the words bitter on her tongue. Left a 5-year-old child with brain damage wandering the streets rather than face consequences for her actions. The rage that flooded through her was overwhelming. She'd spent 19 years suffering because someone had wanted to hurt her father's business interests. Her entire life had been collateral damage in a corporate war. Robert stood abruptly, his face contorted with grief and fury. Victor Huang is still alive. He's running his company from Singapore. He took my daughter from me, took 19 years of her life, over a business deal. Emily watched her father struggle with emotions she recognized, the desire for revenge warring with the knowledge that nothing could undo what had been done. What happens now? She asked quietly. Marcus looked between them. We take this to the authorities. With new evidence and Emily's testimony, we might be able to build a case. But I won't lie, it's been nearly 2 decades. Proving Huang ordered the kidnapping will be difficult. The story broke 3 days later, despite Robert's attempts to control the narrative. Billionaire's lost daughter found alive after 19 years. Emily watched the news coverage with a growing sense of unreality. There she was, in a photo Robert had provided, clean, dressed simply, looking shell-shocked. The reporters called it a miracle. They called her brave. They didn't mention the nights she'd gone hungry or the times she'd been hurt. They turned her tragedy into a feel-good story. The requests for interviews were overwhelming. Every major news outlet wanted her story. Robert's PR team fielded the calls, but the pressure was immense. "You don't have to talk to anyone," Robert assured her. "Your privacy matters more than their curiosity." But Emily found herself wanting to speak. Not for the sensation, but for all the other lost children still. Out there, the ones aging out of foster care with no resources, the ones sleeping on streets while families mourn them without knowing they could be found. She agreed to one interview, with a journalist known for sensitivity and depth rather than sensationalism. Sitting across from Angela Reeves, Emily told her story, not the sanitized version, but the truth. The foster homes where she'd been neglected, the group home where an older boy had broken her arm, the teenage years when she'd run away rather than endure another placement, the nights on the street, learning to be invisible, to protect herself. Why share this? Angela asked gently. Why not just celebrate being reunited with your father? Emily met her eyes steadily. Because I'm one of the lucky ones. I had someone looking for me, someone who never gave up. But there are thousands of kids in the system, thousands of homeless youth who don't have that. If my story can make people see them, really see them, then something good comes from this nightmare. The interview aired, and the response was explosive. But it wasn't all positive. Some people questioned why she'd been homeless, if she was smart enough to survive. Others suggested she was lying about her experiences, that it was some elaborate scam. The cruelty of internet strangers was breathtaking. Emily found herself reading comments late at night, each one a small cut. Probably just after his money. Why didn't she try harder to find her family? Something doesn't add up. Robert found her crying over her laptop at 3 a.m. Why do they hate me? She asked. I didn't do anything wrong. I was a child. Robert gently closed the laptop. People are cruel when they can hide behind screens. And sometimes, stories like yours make them uncomfortable because it reveals how broken our systems are. It's easier to blame you than to face the truth. He pulled her into a hug. You are so incredibly brave, Emily. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. Therapy was harder than Emily had anticipated. Dr. Sarah Caldwell, a trauma specialist, didn't push but gently guided Emily through her memories, helping her process not just the kidnapping and abandonment, but the 19 years that followed. You survived, Dr. Caldwell told her during one session. You developed incredible resilience and survival skills. But now you're safe, and your mind and body need to learn that. It's going to take time. The nightmares were the worst, reliving the moment of being taken, the confusion and terror, waking up in a strange place with no memory of who she was. Sometimes she dreamed of the various foster homes, the feeling of being invisible, unwanted. Other times, she dreamed of her mother, Margaret, a woman she couldn't really remember but grieved for desperately. Robert attended family therapy sessions with her, and during one, the dam broke. I'm angry at you, Emily admitted, the words coming out in a rush. I know it's not fair, I know you searched for me, but I'm angry that you looked away. I'm angry that you couldn't protect me. Robert absorbed this, his face crumpling with pain. You have every right to be angry, he said, his voice thick. I've been angry at myself every day for 19 years. If I could go back, if I could change that one moment, but I can't. All I can do is be here now and hope that someday you can forgive me. The honesty between them, as painful as it was, began to build something new. Not the relationship between the father and the 5-year-old he'd lost, but something forged in truth and survival. Emily started slowly building a new life. She enrolled in online college courses, determined to get the education she'd missed. Robert offered to pay for anything, the best schools, tutors, whatever she needed, but Emily insisted on starting small. "I need to do this at my own pace," she explained. "I can't just jump into being someone I'm not ready to be." She also started volunteering at a homeless shelter, something that raised eyebrows among Robert's social circle, but that Emily felt compelled to do. "These are my people," she told Robert when he expressed concern for her safety. "I was one of them for years. I can't just forget that because my circumstances changed." Working at the shelter, Emily found purpose. She understood what these people were facing in a way that well-meaning volunteers couldn't. She knew which survival strategies actually worked, which resources were genuine, how to navigate the bureaucracy that seemed designed to keep people trapped. One day, she met a girl at the shelter, maybe 17, with the same guarded expression Emily had worn for years. "What's your name?" Emily asked. The girl looked at her with suspicion. "Why do you care?" Emily smiled sadly. "Because someone cared about me, even when I was sure no one did.
I'm Emily.
And I'd like to help if you'll let me." The girl's defenses cracked slightly. "I'm Maya." It was a beginning. 6 months after the reunion, Emily stood in front of a room full of journalists, philanthropists, and policymakers. Robert stood beside her, pride evident in his expression. They were announcing the Emily Chin Foundation, dedicated to helping missing children, supporting foster youth, and providing resources for homeless young people. "I am incredibly lucky," Emily began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I was lost for 19 years, but I was found. I had someone who never stopped looking. But so many children don't have that. So many kids age out of the foster system with no support, no resources, no one who cares." The foundation would fund improved missing children databases, including better cross-referencing with foster care systems. It would provide scholarships and support for foster youth transitioning to adulthood. It would fund shelters that specialized in helping homeless young people get back on their feet. "Money can't give me back the years I lost," Emily continued. "It can't bring back my mother or undo the trauma. But it can prevent other children from falling through the cracks the way I did." The foundation also announced a partnership with law enforcement to reopen cold cases of missing children, using new technology and fresh perspectives. Marcus Torres would head up the investigative team, and they'd hired a team of lawyers to pursue justice in Emily's case. Victor Huang would face consequences for what his sister had done, even if those consequences came decades late. In the months that followed, Emily's life found a new rhythm. She still had hard days, times when the trauma felt overwhelming or when the loss of her mother hit her anew. But she also had moments of joy, dinner with Robert where they talked and laughed, progress in her classes, success stories from the foundation. She was building relationships, slowly learning to trust, gradually becoming comfortable with the idea that she was home. Maya, the girl from the shelter, moved into one of the foundation's transitional housing units. Emily mentored her, helping her get her GED and apply for college. "You saved my life," Maya told her one day. Emily shook her head. "You saved your own life. I just helped you see that you could." Watching Maya graduate high school, seeing her accepted to university with a full scholarship, Emily felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. On the anniversary of her reunion with Robert, they visited Margaret's grave. Emily placed flowers on the headstone, whispering words she wished she could have said. "I'm sorry I couldn't come back sooner. I'm sorry you died thinking I was gone. But Dad found me, and I'm okay. I'm healing, and I promise I'll make you proud." Robert stood beside her, tears streaming down his face, and for the first time, Emily took his hand without hesitation. They stood together, mourning what was lost but also celebrating what remained. Each other, a second chance, the possibility of healing. The story of the billionaire and his lost daughter didn't have a perfect ending. There was too much pain, too many years stolen, too much that could never be recovered. But it had something perhaps more important. It had a beginning, a new start built on truth, resilience, and the stubborn refusal to let tragedy have the final word. Emily was no longer the lost girl or the homeless girl or even just the billionaire's daughter. She was becoming herself, whoever that might be, And for the first time in 19 years, she had the time, support, and space to figure it out. The foundation flourished, helping hundreds of children in its first year. Victor Huang was arrested, the evidence finally strong enough to bring charges. Emily testified, her voice clear and unwavering, speaking not just for herself, but for all the children whose lives had been disrupted by cruelty and greed. And though the nightmares still came sometimes, they were becoming less frequent, replaced gradually by dreams of possibility, of futures that stretched out bright and unwritten before her.